My intention is for you to have whole number solution or fraction solution, but not having like square root solution.
Do you have to redo it?
Yes, please.
Okay.
If you have written it in pencil, it's easier.
But the candy.
Is it okay?
Yeah.
Oh, you haven't even done that. Yes. Or do we leave it at that and you do it in decimal point?
Yes. No, we live in a.
You know what? You know what? I will mark both. If you can't redo it, I'll mark it for you if this is correct. If you redo it, I'll mark it for you. I'm sorry, Candy. I know I forced it to you.
Oh,
Candy started erasing it.
She just erased
Candy
it.
just erased it. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry.
Candy 有冇去擦晒佢好唔好啊？
I know. It's so
Chill, chill,
painful. I never thought I would do that.
Candy 幫你擦晒佢啦，好唔好啊 ？Candy。Oh my god! Look at the hard work. She just erased them. She didn't say she can mark it.
Alright, that's it. Oh, I didn't even do this fast.
他刚刚说这个什么白人感觉加时，是可以这样子做。
Three, four very dark circles. What did he say? What did Mr. Daniel say?
Oh, just now can you do this one correctly? But you didn't say, but if you don't do it, I will say my same one. And then she do it. 巴啦啦小模型，不是有哇！我连原谅的资本都没有。
Everybody sit, please. Everybody sit, please.
Yes. No.
Everybody sit, please. To avoid wasting time tomorrow, please, can I quickly? To avoid us wasting time tomorrow, can we look at the inequality? Just to remind ourselves what we have learned in inequality in Form 1 and Form 2. If anybody has forgotten anything. So the major rules of inequality, can somebody tell me if I have 2x greater than 8, and maybe when I have minus 3x less than or equal to 9, what happens? Start from this one.
X is bigger
X is
than 4.
bigger than 4. What about this one?
X is less than or equal to 3. X equals to bigger or equal to 3. No, the other way around. Yeah.
This one?
Bigger or equal to 3. 3. Yeah.
Anything wrong?
No. Hopefully.
Look very well.
Minus.
Minus 3. Not 3.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or is it 3, huh?
Oh.
So it should be minus 3 because you are dividing by negative 3. So basically we solve inequality like we're solving equation, but there are rules. I will give you all the rules also tomorrow. The first rule is you reverse the sign whenever you multiply or you divide by negative number. And this is why. Everybody look at this. You done? If you are done, you can come in. You bring your paper and you come in. Okay, so this is the reason we reverse. Look at these two numbers, 3 and 5. Greater or less? In between. What do I put in between? Greater or less? Less. Let's see what happens if I multiply by a positive number. Let's multiply by 4, for example. I get 12 here and I get here 20. Greater or less?
Less.
Still less. Let's see what happens if I divide by a positive number. So let me divide by 2. I get 6 and I get 10. Greater or less?
Less.
So nothing changes when I multiply by positive or when I divide by positive. Nothing changes. But let's see what happens if the case is, please lift it up. Let's see what happens if you have a negative involved. Let's start with negative 10 and perhaps, okay, negative 10, negative 15. Greater or less?
Greater.
Negative 10 is greater than negative 15. Right? Now, let's divide. Let's multiply by negative 3. What do you have when you multiply by negative 3?
30.
Plus 30. And this one?
45.
Plus 45. Greater or less?
Less.
What happens? There's a change. Now, let's divide by negative 5, for example. What do you get?
6. Negative 6.
And you keep removing the negative. What about this one? Greater or less?
Greater.
Can you see there's a change again? Well, somebody once argued with me in either my previous school or before I got to my previous school that it only happens when you have negative on both sides. So let's check the case where we don't have negative on both sides. I have negative 8 and I have 4. Greater or less? Less. Okay, so this is less. We all agree, right? So let's multiply this by negative 3. Now is negative 3 there also. We don't want it to look like, oh, it only works for negative 3. No, it doesn't. So that's what happened. We have to multiply by negative 6. What do you get?
48.
Plus 48. And this is
24.
minus 24. Greater or less? So it has changed again. So let's divide by 8 goes in both of them, right?
Yeah.
What's the common factor apart from that? 3. Let's divide by negative 3. It doesn't matter. I'm out of options. Oh, actually, we can use 12. We use 12.
There's still a factor of 3.
Anyway. So what happens? What do we get? Negative 4. And here, positive 2. Greater or less? Less.
Oh.
So anytime you multiply by negative or you divide by negative, you have to change the direction of the sign. Does it make sense?
Okay.
So this is the major thing that differentiates inequality from the normal equation. You pretend you are solving an equation, you keep this intact. When I say pretend you are solving an equation, I do not mean this. We will do this, extensively tomorrow, all right? We're just trying to while away the time. So for example, you have 3x minus 1 less than 5x plus 7. Look at this, for example. If we are solving the equation, because this is the inequality, we are solving the equation, you all know what to do. You collect the like terms, right? So 3x minus 5x, this is plus 7 plus 1, isn't that? Then this is negative 2x. Can you see? I do not change this to equal to. I maintain the inequality sign. Then this is 8. At this point, I need to divide by negative 2 in order to isolate x. And this is where this rule comes in. So the moment you are trying to divide, x will be greater than minus 4. Something like that. So that's what we are trying to say. I'm sure you have learned this in Form 1 or Form 2. Raise your hand if you have learned this before. Okay. So this is something we will do from tomorrow. After that, we will link it with linear programming. Now let me give you a background of what we do with linear programming. Just 60 seconds and I'm out of here. If you have in linear programming, we'll be talking about maybe people that are trying to maximize or minimize. In real life, what do people try to maximize? They try to maximize profits. They try to minimize costs, for example. How much you spend, but you want to gain more, but you want to spend less. That's what any company you work for in future, you establish, that is the goal. Linear programming problem is when you consider all the major factors, like how many people are working there, how many hours do they work, what is the, how many of these commodities do you have, something like that. We put it in inequality form, we plot the graph, then we use something we call feasible regions. So if we plot the graph, and we get, oh, these are the regions, then we use all these points, they are x and y, and we'll be able to get the minimum or the maximum of whatever we are trying to formulate. But there is no way you will know how to get this without inequality problems. So that is why it's at the end of the textbook. But because it's inequality, I want us to just link them together. So immediately we finish tomorrow or maybe on Wednesday, I'll introduce linear programming definitely before we go for Chinese New Year. But we may not go into the deep linear programming until after Chinese New Year. Okay? Have a nice day, everybody.
Thank you, Alex.
Can stop that now.
Yes, ma'am.